Modern America first saw light on a Hollywood screen. It was largely the product of 6 movie studios established in the 1920s and run for over 30 years by a group of Jewish immigrants. They had strikingly similar backgrounds.
All of these men who founded Hollywood were born within a 500-mile radius of one another. And all of them wound up roughly within 15 miles of one another in Los Angeles. One could say that the American dream was really born in Eastern Europe.
At the turn of the century, movies reflected the vision of America shared by Thomas Edison and the other men who invented the film industry. Most of these old stock Protestants saw film as an amusement for the working classes. Adolf Zucker believed that to attract the middle class, one had to change not just the theaters, but the films. Bypassing Edison, he imported from France this film, featuring a famous stage actress. He premiered it in a Broadway theater. Not wanting to depend on Europeans for quality films, Carl Laemmle and the other Jewish exhibitors began producing their own films. Edison decided that the Jews had overstepped their bounds. To shut them out in 1908, he organized a producers' trust that declared a monopoly on film production in America. 7 years later, Edison's trust would lose its monopoly in the courts. But in 1912, to escape Edison and the goons he sent to enforce his control of the industry, the future moguls headed west to the orange groves of California. Here they found immediate success.
Now, why did they move to California? I believe that they went there because California was a raw social environment. And although there was a social system in place, it was nowhere near as sophisticated and nowhere near as entrenched as the social hierarchy in Boston or New York or even Chicago, where these moguls came from. So coming to California, they realized that they could create their own social environment. They could create an empire of their own, not only on screen, but within their own lives and their own social environment. And that's precisely what they did. And that's precisely what they did. And that's precisely what they did.
Following Laemmle by 1920, Harry Cohen, Zucker, Goldwyn, Fox, and Mayer had set up their own studios, golden shtetls, where each was clearly in charge.
And these guys were ruthless, and these guys were ruthless, and these guys were ruthless. They used women. They treated stars brutally sometimes.
Why do I run it? Because I got horse sense, goddammit. Showmanship! And also, and I hope Lou told you this, I am bigger and meaner and louder than any other kike in this town. Did you tell him that, Lou? And I don't mean my dick is bigger than yours. It's not a sexual thing, although you're the writer, you know more about that. Coffee?
Jack Warner was considered a primitive, told terrible jokes.
From beginning to end, the executive had the primary input into the picture and supervised every aspect of production, over and above the fact that beyond any individual picture, it was the executive who created the entire studio apparatus. Every producer who worked there, every director who worked there, every writer who worked there, and every star who worked there was part of the larger system that was created by the Hollywood Jews.
I'm not sure that there was an, quote, American dream before the Jews came to Hollywood and invented it. What you had was a westward movement, and you had the idea of freedom, but you didn't have what we have today, which is a popular culture that creates dreams. That's a dream factory.
They created their own America, an America which is not the real America. It's their own version of the real America, which is not the real America. It's their own version of the real America, which is not the real America. It's their own version of the real America. But ultimately, this shadow America becomes so popular and so widely disseminated that its images and its values come to devour the real America. And so the grand irony of all of Hollywood is that Americans come to define themselves by the shadow America that was created by Eastern European Jewish immigrants who weren't admitted to the precincts of the real America.
In the 1920s and 30s, movie houses became temples of the new Hollywood religion. Movie houses became temples of the new Hollywood religion. Movie houses became temples of the new Hollywood religion. Jewish values made kitsch. 75% of all Americans went to the movies at least once a week.
This kind of movie-going was religious because it had to do with worship. It's because it had to do with worship. It's because it had to do with worship. It had to do with the screen being larger than you were, and you being in awe of what you were looking at, and feeling a certain reverence for it, and feeling a certain reverence for it, and feeling a certain reverence for it. And so there was, maybe you could say, a bogus spirituality, but it was a spirituality still that was believed in.
Actors became the gods and goddesses of the new American religion. Actors became the gods and goddesses of the new American religion. Actors became the gods and goddesses of the new American religion.
Getting cheerfully mobbed. It's frenzied friendship, frantic fandom. Here she comes, the star.
And where there are new gods, there must be new idols. And where there are new gods, there must be new idols. And where there are new gods, there must be new idols. And where there are new gods, there must be new idols. So the studio heads began a movie guild with a lofty title of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. It was Mayer's brilliant idea to create the Oscars, where the movie moguls could honor themselves by giving each other awards. In this way, they went from being a group of immigrant Jews to award-winning American producers.
The whole notion that Hollywood pins itself on is intermarriage. The whole idea of inter-ethnic romance. Now, why do they do that? First of all, because love is a very democratic ideal. It knows no borders, it knows not riches, it knows not tradition, it knows simply the matters of the heart. In addition to that, when a Jew can marry a non-Jew, particularly part of the establishment culture, that's really a wonderful indication of how far up into society Jews have come. Indication of how far up into society Jews have come. Indication of how far up into society Jews have come.
The Hollywood Jews may have wanted to marry into white America, but when it came to music, Jewish composers looked to black America. But when it came to music, Jewish composers looked to black America. But when it came to music, Jewish composers looked to black America. Harold Arlen, the son of a liturgical singer or cantor, became one of the foremost popularizers of the blues.
Jews served as messengers, in essence, of black culture. They took it, they consumed it, they integrated it into their own cultural repertoire, and then introduced it to white America that was essentially willing to listen to Jews and to partake of what Jews had to offer in a way that they never would from blacks.
One of the things that made American films so exportable is that anyone, anywhere could identify with so many of the themes of American movies, one of which was the idea of the outsider, which was a Jewish theme. Jews being outsiders, making films about outsiders. You see this even in monster pictures. I mean, King Kong. There's a film about, an outsider. And yet, it's the monster, if you want to call King Kong that, with whom the audience sympathizes.
Carl Laemmle was an outsider. He resembled an elf. Not surprisingly, Universal's films often championed marginal beings who were persecuted, like the Jews of Europe. In creating the great movie musical, Hollywood adapted the Broadway musical, an original American art form almost wholly created by fellow immigrant Jews. The music and lyrics were often based on classic stories, reinterpreted from a Jewish perspective, reinterpreted from a Jewish perspective, reinterpreted from a Jewish perspective.
Almost all of the writing pairs that have come to epitomize Broadway have been Jewish, whether it's Lerner and Lowe and Rodgers and Hammerstein, Jerome Kern. Almost all of them have been Jewish, with the exception, I think, of Cole Porter, really, here. And if you look at their plays, none of them, with the exception of Fiddler on the Roof, are about overtly Jewish themes, but all of them are about overtly Jewish concerns.
Irving Berlin did more than any composer to Americanize Jewish aspirations.
Someday I'm going to murder the bugler. Someday they're going to find him dead.
To understand Berlin is to understand the Hollywood moguls. Another cantor's son, he started life in the midst of pogroms.
My life in bed. Oh, how I hate to get up in the morning. Oh, how I love to remain in bed.
Berlin was a Russian immigrant who would go on to write the quintessential American songs. He's a kind of Cyrano de Bergerac. In the foreground is Fred Astaire, the embodiment of American aristocracy, full of grace and upperclassmanship. In the background, the person writing the music and the lyrics is this little Jewish guy. For over 60 years, he tried to reinvent himself. In the process, he infused life into a whole new American ideal. Along with the unofficial anthem of the United States, Irving Berlin wrote the American classics Easter Parade and that most Jewish of Yuletide fantasies, White Christmas.
I'm dreaming of a white Christmas.
Often the first thing to go was the Jewish name. Often the first thing to go was the Jewish name. Often the first thing to go was the Jewish name. The Hollywood Jews were obsessed with erasing anything Jewish in their films, their lives, and the lives of their stars. They were obsessed with erasing anything Jewish in their films, their lives, and the lives of their stars. They were obsessed with erasing anything Jewish in their films, their lives, and the lives of their stars. Theodosia Goodman became Theda Bara. Sophia Kosso became Sylvia Sidney. Isser Danielovich Dembski became Kirk Douglas. Leo Jacobi became Lee J. Cobb. Shirley Shrift became Shelley Winters. Bernard Schwartz became Tony Curtis. David Kaminsky became Danny Kaye. Edward Iskevitz became Eddie Cantor. Melvin Hesselberg became Melvin Douglas. Muni Wiesenfreund, a star of the Yiddish theater, became Paul Muni. Emanuel Goldenberg became Edward G. Robinson. The G was a reminder of who he really was. Nice Jewish girls, such as Lily Palmer, Julie Holliday, and Lauren Bacall, or Betty Persky, helped to define the American woman. Not all the Jewish talent went to Hollywood to assimilate. There were over 50 non-Hollywood Yiddish films produced in New York before the Second World War.
Trouble, trouble, wird Hecher breiter. Da lebt das Theatersachen bei, es helft kein Weinen, kein Geschrei. Trouble hat größer in der Kleine. A jeder dreht sich Hand in Kuhn.
These films were the flip side of the Hollywood movies. They parodied Hollywood's optimism and Fred Astaire's top-hat gentility. Many who could have gone to Hollywood stayed in New York to make films that expressed their Jewish identity.
These films were shown to an audience which was almost entirely made up of immigrants and sometimes the children of immigrants, and these films, by and large, had a very, very different point of view than Hollywood movies. I mean, the Yiddish movies were kind of fighting a rearguard action to protect certain forms of Jewish cultural expression against the sort of overwhelming, seductive power of the larger American culture.
In this classic of Yiddish cinema, a great cantor, played by Moshe Oisher, is drawn into the secular world of opera. On the night of his operatic debut, he learns of his son's death. Unable to perform, he returns to his synagogue to lead the high holiday prayers. Heartbroken, he dies. Here the attempt to reconcile Jewish and secular worlds ends tragically.
Wait a minute. You ain't heard nothing yet. Wait a minute, I tell you. You ain't heard nothing yet. Goodbye. Don't cry.
Warner Brothers' The Jazz Singer was a revolutionary silent film that broke into sound with each musical number. Here, as in the Yiddish film, a cantor's son, played by Al Jolson, who was in real life a cantor's son, has to choose between American fame and Jewish loyalty. At first, the cantor's son seems to choose Judaism. But in assimilationist Hollywood, the story could not end there. Hollywood had to have a Hollywood ending.
Mammy,
Here, Dad and his old Jewish ways are dead, while the hero in American blackface sings triumphantly with his Gentile girlfriend waiting in the wings.
I wanna your smile on my
The Jewish fear of standing out was expressed through another icon that would make its way to the screen.
Superman was invented by two Jewish kids in the late 1930s, when there also was a worldwide upsurge in very frightening anti-Semitism. Superman is discovered like Moses in the bulrushes. He's an immigrant from another planet who comes to Earth. He has his identity as a mild-mannered intellectual, but really underneath he's the man of steel. I think that's a very suggestive Jewish fantasy. It's almost as if he's passing all the time.
While the Jew felt like an alien in America, Superman was a real alien.
This looks like a job for Superman.
Yet incredibly, he is the only superhero who manages to keep his identity secret without wearing a mask. Only Jews could have created a story based on the premise that all one needs is a Gentile demeanor to hide in plain sight.
You would have equal opportunity foxholes. If you go back and look at those movies, there was always one Jewish character who was never presented as Jewish, but he was Cohen or Schwartz from Brooklyn. There was always one black character, too.
Wesley Epps, Private, 3rd Engineer Battalion.
The American Army during the Second World War was not integrated except in Hollywood movies. And the Office of War Information was very eager to keep our enemies from making capital out of any sort of problems in America. So they didn't want movies that had any racial tensions of any sort.
Corporal Jake Feingold, 4th Chemical Company, USA.
Blurring the line between Gentile and Jew was precisely what the Moguls wanted. Blurring the line between Gentile and Jew was precisely what the Moguls wanted. Blurring the line between Gentile and Jew was precisely what the Moguls wanted. In fact, some of Hollywood's leading Jews openly espoused assimilation and the literal mixing of bloods as an American ideal. The Moguls are gone, but their vision survives. The America of Edison and Rankin has given way to an alien ideology. It isn't the communism or Judaism that the Gentile elite once feared. It's Americanism, as defined by Hollywood. The icons endure. The little guy fighting the odds, the pogrom imagery, the desperate desire to survive, and the various races assimilating to create the ultimate happy ending.
I'm not Jewish. Nobody's perfect.
There was a Hollywoodism then, there's a Hollywoodism today. I would go further and say it is what is the ruling ideology of our culture. Hollywood culture is the dominant culture. It is the fantasy structure that we're all living inside. It is the fantasy structure that we're all living inside. It is the fantasy structure that we're all living inside.
They admit the truth in this book, but deny the expansion of their influences elsewhere. They deny the expansion of their influence into areas such as financial markets, Investopedia.com Key takeaways. The Rothschild family is one of the wealthiest and most prominent banking families in the world. The family exported banking traditions from their base in Germany in the 1700s and 1800s. J.P. Morgan is one of the most storied and powerful bankers of all time, consolidating industries and bailing out the government in times of economic turmoil. Paul Warburg was instrumental in creating the U.S. Central Bank, the Federal Reserve. Amedeo P. Giannini democratized banking and made it available to the regular individual, not just the elite. Charles Merrill, the founder of Merrill Lynch, further democratized banking, bringing Wall Street to Main Street. Advertising and public relations. Aerospace. Cosmetics. Energy and mining, food, manufacturing and distribution, music industry, newspapers and publishing, pharmaceuticals and healthcare, real estate, retail, technology and software, new media, host of different venues, television, film and video, tourism and hotels, restaurants, governments. They have quietly done this around the world.